Here we go. All right. So I'm recording now. Welcome to the first official CAP webinar. Awesome. So 50 plus people, and I'm very excited to be able to connect with some of you because I see you on LinkedIn. I see you rebounding on many posts, and it's nice to see people on the video screen. So that's nice. Today I wanted to chat about the use of Canvas. And I really love canvases, and I use them quite a bit in my daily life because this is a way for me to frame conversation and to really capture the essence of anything that you're doing on a very simple, framework. Now, obviously, a canvas never replaces a very good pricing strategy plan or pricing execution plan or strategic planning process, but it is a way to tell a story. And so I've been very, very, I would say, taken by the business model canvas that you see here by Strategizer, and then by the lean canvas that you see on the right. Those are excellent canvas framework. I actually became certified coach in the business model canvas, including the value proposition. So I use that quite a bit. I'm about to, get certified in the lean canvas because I do believe in the use of canvas and also being certified. And you'll see me write a lot in pricing about the need that we need to have credibility in the right certification. And this is why I get certified quite a bit, including CPP and other certification, because it builds credibility, especially like me when I'm facing very, very tough French engineers and I have to convince them that I speak with authority. So I love these canvases because they show really a picture. Now the lean canvas is more about, the external world of the opportunity. The business model canvas is more balanced, internal versus external, and really focuses on attractiveness, desirability, viability, and feasibility of an opportunity. Now you could use those for a customer, for an offer, for a solution, for a product, for a segment, and it's actually pretty good. So yes, both of these methodology have a pricing, section. They actually call it a revenue management block. So block 9 for revenue streams for business model canvas, and the revenue streams, pretty much, the same for the lean canvas, which is awesome. I think it's a first good step to see that we have a pricing discussion in the framing of new business model, new opportunities, new products, new subscription models, et cetera, et cetera. But at the end of the day, it's too light. So you look at the methodologies and you look at the books that these people publish, and those are great experts. I connect with them quite often. I'm trying to convince them to focus more on pricing, frankly. But it's very light, so the books are, will get into, the revenue modeling, the freemium models, some subscription elements, some maybe a component of pricing at the high level, but it's very generic. And so as I became certified in business model canvas, I was very intrigued in going deeper into the methodology and feeding much more pricing information in that canvas. So back in 2015, I blew up the block 9 and block 6 into what I used to call the pricing puzzle. And it was too complicated. I had like 10 blocks, and it was, it was kind of drinking from the fire hydrant there, and it's too complicated. So I've been really reducing and looking at how do I make it simple. And then eventually I tied it to the 3 C's of pricing. So if you follow my work in pricing, I always recommend to keep it simple, but I also focus a lot on the 3 C's, right? Cost, competition, and customers. And those are typically the pricing orientations that in academia, most consulting and practitioner will use to frame their pricing, right? To price their, price setting, I would say, to set up their price setting methodologies. So, and then what again, if you follow my work, I've been doing quite a bit of work on change management. And I added 1 C called the change management, change, because whether you're doing a new pricing model, a new pricing structure, you're going from cost to value, you will have to really pay attention to the change management aspect. Obviously, a lot of you know about subscription-based pricing, and moving from a capex to an opex model requires a ton of change management internally to get the people convinced, but externally educating your customers, dealing with trade channels, and all that good stuff. So a lot of emphasis on change. Now, if you look at what's published on pricing, you will have other C's. There's communication, there is capacity, constraints. So all of them are obviously very important, but I fold them into the 4 C's. So communication for me will be change, right? Capacity will be in cost, right? So never perfect, but I wanted to keep it very simple, because the more you make these canvases complicated, the more people break down when they get to using them, all right? So keep it simple is clear. So you see the canvas here, I use it in many ways. First of all, I use it in a way of documenting what's being done in pricing. So whether you have to price a product, a service, a subscription, a new business model, or whatever it is, a lot of pricing is fragmented in many pieces of, many laptops, many processes, many functions, and a lot of this is difficult to extract and put together in a story. So one way I'm using the PMIC is to document a pricing decision. Now, this is obviously not the first thing that I will put forward in a presentation when we're showing to a multifunctional leadership team, or how do we develop a product or a service or package or subscription. But I'll make sure that in the appendix of my work, I will have one page, which is this one, completely filled with all the critical information that needs to be taken into account when making the pricing decision. So instead of saying, if a general manager asks you, how did you come up with that decision, pricing level? Then you say, well, let me get to the canvas, and I can show you all the critical information that led to the pricing decision. And it's summarized in one page. So this is more for a purpose of gathering all the information in one spot and not having to open 55 documents, spreadsheet, PowerPoint, and then making phone calls to get that information, right? So in there, then I have a basic PowerPoint template in which I would enter that picture, and then I would insert text boxes and start filling out the sections with bullet points. Very simple, right? And when we get to the next slide, I'll show you, I'll show you what kind of information goes in there. So you document all the work, you put that in appendix, and then, right, guys, you know the story, right? Pricing, 50% of pricing is confidence, right? If you go in front of the top management and you're hesitating, you're not sure, you don't know where the information is, immediately you lose traction with these people. But if you tell them, good question, let me show you how we came up with that decision, and you show one visual with all the critical information and how you came up with that decision, including change management, guys, you look like $1 million, right? So it's a way to gain confidence in leaders when we look at how you made a decision. And by the way, this is multifunctional, so you could also mention, marketing, pricing, finance, supply chain was involved, so we're good to go. So for traditional, pricing, I would say, structure for a product or service is less resounding when you do maybe a new pricing model like a subscription or usage-based pricing, where you really need to convince that you've done the homework. So think of this as a storyline. Think also of this as you gather these, or you're doing an inventory of all the information you have, or about a subscription, about a relevant opportunity. What are the gaps that you have? Maybe you didn't pay enough attention to cost. Maybe you're missing willingness to pay information. Maybe you haven't done a great competitive review, and you don't know what your competitors' differentiators are. So when you assemble that information, and we've done that many times in Thales, is, well, we're missing a lot on change. We haven't paid enough attention to change. So it also allows you to track, what information you have and what's missing, so you have a complete and balanced, I would say, a framing input to go to the framing decisions for your opportunity. Well, so that's pretty much the benefit of the PMIC. So I started doing this because we wanted to document the information, and not having to open 55 slides or put too many slides in appendix, which, by the way, no one reads, right? So you also, the second way of using a canvas, this canvas, is in design. So we've done multiple workshops where we actually blew up the canvas and put it on the wall, and then people came with a business model prepared, some element of value proposition, and all the work that they had done before. And then we started with the first session, and we started, with Post-it notes, putting information on the canvas. And then we did a follow-up session 6 weeks later, where, obviously after the first session, we identified gaps, and then we came back with additional information. And in the gaps of the first session, maybe they had to do a little bit more customer validation. They had to study maybe the P&L scenarios, and et cetera, et cetera. And in our sprints, so, what we call the value-based pricing framing of digital innovations, we had 60 days in general, and one workshop in front, one workshop in the back, and then completed the canvas in 60 days. Especially when we get into digital MVPs like cloud-based solution, IoT, predictive maintenance, connected stuff. So, very much a framework of development, which you will tie to the lean canvas and the business model canvas. So remember, this is, you can't forget that that is a context, right? But in essence, what we don't want the PMIC to be is a duplication of redoing the work. This is not the goal. The PMIC is a design and documentation process to look at what's been done and what's missing, and then get it done in a period of time. So a lot of the time, people say, well, do I have to redo this? No, it's already done somewhere. Chances are you've done the value prop. Chances are you've looked at the customer problem. Chances are you understand willingness to pay somewhere, you've done some research. So, we're not doing this to reinvent the wheel. We're doing this to really set and frame the pricing discussion around the business model and make it very solid. All right, so that's slide one, just a little bit of a background, and and now I need to go to slide two. Oh, people still are coming in, 66 people. And for some reason here we go. So this is a beautiful blown up version of the canvas. It's version 1.2, which I redesigned a little bit, and it's work in progress. So I'm looking forward to working with some of you to look at how we can make this even better. And in version 1.2, I changed a little bit of the framing decision on the right, and I wanted to keep it at 5. So I have to, and you could see the 5 blocks of decision on the right are around more digital, right? When you get into subscription, usage-based, what's the packaging, what's the modeling, what's the pricing level and structure, what is a profit formula, which means how are you going to make money in the P&L, and then how do you scale? How do you execute your pricing? And if you read some of my work in the data monetization book, a lot of the innovation in digital innovation fail in the scaling mode, because at the end of the day, you guys know that not many companies have a dedicated pricing team. Sometimes they're involved in the design of the pricing strategy. Sometimes they're not. And if they're not, then it's difficult to bring an innovation back in the core business and to scale it successfully. So someone needs to own pricing of that innovation to make sure it's accepted by the sales force, the trade channels are on board. So there's a huge amount of execution in the digital innovation. So what I did to make it a little bit easier is created some of the questions that we needed to think about or we needed to answer in the canvas. And here I'm really focusing on some of the critical components, what I call the, not everything is doable. As you can imagine, in a perfect world, we would have all the budget to do customer research, to have insights, to do pricing research, but it's never the case. We rarely have a complete picture of the information. So a lot of the time we have to use collective intelligence, what we know from the past, and then with a dose of gut feeling, right? But if there is information out there, we need to find it. So what I encourage teams working with the canvas is really to focus on what I call the magical sequence. So there is some critical components in the canvas that we need to have, documented, and we need to, get the information from. The first one is the customer pain points, right? What is a customer problem? And usually that customer problem comes from the lean canvas, right? So the lean canvas has a section on customer problem. The business model canvas has pains and gains, and then you rank them. And typically you would enter here 1 or 2 pains, critical pains that really you want to focus on when you're developing your offer, and then you're going to make sure relate the pricing to that pain. So again, here you're not going to write a Bible. You're not going to enter 55 pains. You're going to maybe enter 1 or 2 pains that are the most critical pain that you're going to then link to your true differentiators, because that's, I know there is a pain. I know this is a critical pain, and then my solution, my value prop, is highly differentiated in the way it responds to that pain, right? So those are 2 components of the what I call the magical sequence: the customer pain and your wow and true differentiators, right? And that is, I spent quite a bit of time looking at true differentiation because, it is very difficult to find, right? Whether it's a product, it's a corporate differentiator, a functional differentiator, a people differentiator, a service differentiator, you really have to make sure you have your true differentiator clearly identified. And that's, I think, one of the, I would say not a negative side, but a limitation of the business model canvas is the fact that they don't clearly identify and put in the canvas the critical differentiator. Where the lean canvas has a box called wow differentiators. And that's clear, you have competition. What are your differentiators versus competition? So there is no, second guessing here. So those are 2 components. Then when you get into the customer side, what is the value pool? What is also, if you have differentiation, if your subscription, or your value prop of your subscription is going to solve a lot of customer pain, how do you monetize and dollarize that differentiation? This is EVE models, right? So you would do an EVE model, economic value estimation, and estimate the value pool. And then that value pool you would enter that in the canvas. Value pool estimation is $2 million per year per system, or 150,000 euros per product over 5 years. So remember, you're not putting everything in the canvas, but that value pool is important. And this is pretty much the estimation of value that you're going to exchange with the customer through your product, your service, your subscription, your usage-based model, et cetera, et cetera. So that 3rd component of the magical chain is value pool. So customer key pains, your wow differentiators, and then the value pool, which is derived from the quantification of the value from your wow differentiators. I think you guys follow me so far. Another critical point of the magic chain is willingness to pay. So now you have a value pool, right? You can, maybe save the customer 100,000 euros per year. Well, how much do you think the customer is going to be willing to pay in premium, right? Because it's never, unless you're Apple or you do hypnosis with your clients, the clients are never going to pay the full maximum price. You're not going to extract the full value, right? Except maybe in B2C with psychology of pricing and branding. But when you get into B2B and B2G in the industrial side, you're going to have to give a vast majority of that value to your customers, right? So then you would, find a way to quantify that willingness to pay. Either you have willingness to pay research, and you enter some elements right here in the customer box, or you put low, medium, high, or you put a rating, or you design a kind of a sharing mechanism. I have designed a tool, a very simple Excel tool to be able to answer a few questions, and it will give you a potential extraction percentage out of the value pool. Let's say through 10 moderators, then you might be able to extract 33% of the value pool. And that is a bit of equivalent of willingness to pay. Now you may have price sensitivity information also that will, derive how much of that value pool you can extract, and that will be in the cost box. All right, so pains, well differentiators, value pool, willingness to pay, and eventually you get into the pricing, right? When you have done the 4 early components, then you have to come up with a very strong pricing strategy, and that includes packaging, the modeling, and all that good stuff. So, and I call that the pricing power kind of a component. So if there is only 5 things to worry about, if you don't have that, it's going to be very difficult to make a good pricing decision. Frankly, there's plenty more information that you're going to have to produce, but if you want to be successful and do value-based pricing for your offer, and focus a lot on the customer box, then those are things that you need to have. And now I'll go to the. So what I did here is I came up with, you have the 4 C's of pricing with the change management at the bottom. And I made some changes here in the version 1.2. I recommend some process tools and methods that are very critical in, finding the information. And I also recommend, the outcomes that you want to have in the canvas. Now, a lot of people freak out when we look at this because it's 20 techniques, right? It's a lot, right? And here I pretty much summarize a lot of the things that need to be done in pricing. So usually my recommendation is you don't do all 20. It's if you have time, you document multiple of the components. You focus on the essential ones, but some of that stuff should be already done. So it's a matter of finding it and putting a summary in the canvas. So it's not about reinventing the wheel. And then you look at what's missing, right? And then you go to work, and maybe in 45, 60, 90 days, you actually complete the canvas, because it's never perfect. You never have the full canvas with all 20 outcomes fully identified. It's and documented. Not easy. So you focus on the critical part. You focus on what really is important for your opportunities, your bid, or your new business model or value model, and then you get to work. Now, a lot in the change management. So if you look at the 3 C's, I didn't invent anything here. All these are techniques that are being well documented in books, and you probably all using already. Value prop, segmentation, journey mapping, value maps are easy, right? In the competitive analysis, benchmarks, black hats is a type of predicting competitors' behavior, and used a lot in for strategic agreements and government contracts. The VRIO framework is a methodology to use to extract true differentiation. Porter's 5 forces, etc., etc. This is nothing new. Now, on the change management side, I listed a few assessments, and these are some of the assessments that I've created. The monetization readiness assessment, the subscription-based pricing readiness assessment, the change management readiness assessment, and then 4 and 5 are tools that exist, readily available. Lots of companies do pricing capability assessment, whether it's a small one or a big one. There's plenty of tools out there to look at, hey, what are we missing in terms of pricing to be able to be successful in execution of our pricing strategy. So it is a bit overwhelming, but focus on if you use the canvas, focus on repeating that it's work that's being done by multiple people, and because pricing is multifunctional, we need to gather all that input into one location. That's a goal of the exercise, and then all the outcomes obviously inform the strategy of pricing. So if it's an innovation, because the PMIC is really focused on innovation in service, in business model, and subscription models, then you will go through the packaging, single price, good, better, best, a la carte, closed bundle, open bundle, all these packaging, framework, framing, that that have been well published and you could find them on multiple websites. Then you go into the model, which is, it could be upfront, totally CapEx oriented, or it could be totally variable, consumption based, linear, or tiered, or and it could be hybrid, a bit upfront, a bit variable, and that it could include usage. It could be a monthly subscription, annual subscription. So all these are again well documented, and I have some of that in my data monetization book. Then you have to set the structure of pricing: list price, discounts, rebates, and all the tiers for your rebates and your discounts. And 4, you're gonna maybe look at an OPEX model versus a CapEx model. So I recently conducted a framing of a subscription inside Thales, and we looked at 3 different scenarios with a different version of the hybrid model. with upfront and recurring. And frankly, if you go and defend that in front of finance people, you're going to have to show various scenarios and look at the impact on profit and the impact on cash flow, because right now it's all about cash, right, guys? Cash is king. And then last but not least, this is where you actually focus on the scaling and the execution of your pricing strategy, and that that includes having right visions and guidelines. Who's going to get trained, how you're going to train them, the scaling plan, who's getting the pricing first, how do you introduce your innovation into the market, who's accountable for pricing, so you could do a RACI, and then who does pricing. And frankly, we have a long way to go to get pricing fully adopted in companies. So right now we're around 20% of companies have a dedicated pricing team. So we have a long way to go, which means, keep that in mind. If 80% of companies today are doing digital transformations, and if about 80 to 85% of companies today are considering subscriptions, and only 20% of these companies have pricing team, who does the pricing? Huh. Good question, right? Marketing, sales, finance, accounting, who does it? And there is a high chance it's going to be cost plus. There is a higher chance it's going to be free. And there is an even greater higher chance that it's going to be crap. Therefore, the bullshit button. Come on, bullshit button. You all need to get a bullshit button. It's available on Amazon, and you put that on your desk. Okay, so in the spirit of agility, the PMIC is a framework with the 4 C's. What you put in the process, tools, methods, and the outcome and output is yours to change. There's plenty of other methods that you could actually include in there that I have not listed. There's so much you could put on one slide. These are the typical ones that can be used, but I'm sure in specific markets, like there is regulations that, in healthcare and pharma, that will be, very important. There is also capacity analysis of the industry, supply demand, all that stuff. But I didn't put it in there, but the goal of this camp is to be flexible. So you could use any, you could add and modify because it's available. You could add things that you want to put or remove things that you could put 2 per box or 3 per box. So, we have to be agile with this, and we have to make sure that we focus on getting the outcome produced and not being fully process oriented, because process orientation doesn't give you any actually good output. So if you see what I mean. So it's focusing on the critical methods. I would say if I had to focus on something, it would be the magical sequence, customer pains, wow differentiators, value pool, willingness to pay, and then the pricing, very clear, transparent, strong pricing strategy called pricing power. So those are really what I want to see. And frankly, when I participate in framing of digital innovation, most of the time I will drive them very hard on these 5 components. What is the customer pain, right? And are you solving the customer pain better than your competitors? Do you understand the customer problems better than your competitors do? Because anybody can do a value proposition. And it could be a very plain vanilla value proposition. So do you have really significant, differences in skills to go out and discover the customer unmet needs? Nothing to do with pricing, but more to do with innovation, upfront, front end of innovation. So you make this your own. It becomes your way of working. You blow it up on the walls. You document it. But for me, I want to see in every single, I would say, digital innovation or innovation in general, I would want to see a canvas in appendix that's filled, and having a vast majority of the information that is fragmented and spread in multiple documents. And that is a win for me. At least it puts pricing on the map. It puts visibility on the pricing strategy. And then we're able to answer the question, with confidence, and I would say greater collective intelligence. Okay. So, and then when you do this, I think it's good that we put change management in the forefront of the analysis, because it is, nothing gets done if you don't worry about change management. So at least we pay attention to these, and it's most of the time it's forgotten when we deploy these advanced tools, and we maybe deploy algorithmic pricing decision making, or we really have to rebalance the technical and the social type of discussions in pricing decision. So that's a canvas. I try to use it most of the time. I tell you, it's obviously it's a matter of getting under the skin of your marketing managers, your product line managers, your digital product owners. Generally speaking, if you use a canvas already, it is easier to convince them to blow up the revenue box, like I mentioned before, than if you don't. So it is easier to contextualize your PMIC when you do a canvas, because you quickly realize in block 9 and block 6, there's not much intelligence in it, right? And so you need to force them kind of, okay, let's work on this. And this is when you recommend and you remind them of using the pricing specialists. The pricing experts have to come to the table. So it's a good way to penetrate the innovation circles and the digital activities, right? And where are the pricing experts? Well, and what framework do they use? Well, this is me, and I'm using PMIC, for example. All right. So I would like to maybe open up to some questions. We've been 33 minutes in the discussion, and maybe if there is question, I can go into the chat. Oh yeah, 19. Gee, I should have paid attention. All right. So Stefan, what's your take on the reasons as to why C-level does not see pricing as an opportunity yet? Well, I'll tell you that. This is my next year, and I wanted to announce today that CAP is moving forward with an industry book. We'll produce a CAP book. It will be destined to convince the C-suite to invest in pricing. It will address the myth and the perception of the C-suite in pricing, which are all over the map. I have signed up several sponsors, big tech companies and consulting companies, to help with the financing of the book. And we will have voices of practitioners, we will have voices of experts, and we will focus on impact of pricing. And that book will be printed and sent to the C-suite, as many C-suite people as possible, because we need to get to the point where we need to convince them better. When it gets to getting our share of investments in pricing, we're not getting it. We are not able to finish, the top 3 investment, priorities of large group. Now, some of you may have, but in generally speaking, we're not there yet. So there's a lot of hypotheses for that, and I'm actually it'll be in the survey that you'll all receive. I'm actually finishing the survey itself, and I'm going to ask you to answer a few questions on what do you think pricing investments are not prioritized very high in the C-suite. So what specific processes do you recommend as most effective for the canvas? I would say the EVE, the customer segmentation, those are bread and butter. The value prop is important for the customers. For the competitors, you have to do your benchmarks. If you have products, you need to understand your true differentiators, functionality by functionality. Use a VRIO model. Porter is nice, but it's high level. And in your cost side, the cost volume profit analysis is good. The price sensitivity is always good. So those are they've been around for 40 years, and they should be widely used by pricing practitioners. Do we need change management for every pricing decision? Well, so it depends on how radical or disruptive your innovation is. if you do a product pricing, you know, you have an innovation on product pricing, you know, I would say you don't need to kind of do a specific analysis of change management. But if you're introducing a new pricing model, like a usage-based or a subscription-based, or you're radically changing the perception of your offer in the market, you will have to do change management. Because internally, for example, you start developing software and you move towards selling software around the product. You're going to have to train the salespeople to sell software. And then you have, you know, moving from I'm selling $1 million equipment to I'm selling a $2,000 license, software license. It's a different ballgame altogether. We're not going to do it because we don't see the potential. So this is where you start kicking in the, you know, with change management and the training, the gaps, and, you know, so I would recommend when it's disruptive, it's good to focus on. How hard is it to implement PMIC in B2C versus B2B? Yeah, that's a good point. I would say, you know, B2C world, they're blessed with transactions and blessed with data. So it should be easier to extract some nuggets, right? But generally speaking, the B2C companies are much more sophisticated in pricing, and they may be more using pricing and some of these tools in the day-to-day activities of their decision-making activities, because they have data. So they'll have product data, usage data. We're going to have customer sentiment data. We're going to have, you know, value perception data, value maps, and we do segmentation quantitatively. So maybe there is less a need to use a canvas because pricing is more embedded and analytics is more embedded in the DNA of companies. I'm not sure, but yes, I mean, it's probably more relevant for B2B than B2C, I would say. Okay, so I'll go down. How would you deal with a situation where you have a very monopolistic environment? So, you know, first of all, this is very rare, but when it happens, you know, it's complicated. You know, when you're the sole supplier and you're a big incumbent and you have to protect your business, you know, there is a, you know, you get in, first of all, it's difficult to maintain. There is always the customer thinking that you are abusing with pricing, and there is lots of questions on price fairness because there is less choice. So I found, for example, when we renew very large contracts and you're the incumbent, it's much more difficult to estimate what the customer is going to do versus if you have a lot of choices and the customer has choices. Defending an incumbent position is quite complicated. And monopolistic situation, you can still use the techniques, but you're going to have to, you know, look at price fairness and how do you price so that you don't create competition because the customers are getting upset with your pricing, or but I'm sure there's not that many markets where there is a monopolistic situation, unless it's a country or. Okay, and have you done both B2B and B2C? I've done mostly B2B because my work is in B2B, so I haven't used it for B2C. But in a lot of digital innovation, you have to skip one level and you got to go down the value chain, and then you got to pay attention to your users, and you may have to apply B2C as well as B2B. Like, for example, you're offering connectivity services in the plane. Although you're selling to the plane, the airlines, you may have to interact with the users, the B2C. So you're going to have to start getting familiar with, you know, what the passengers want, what the consumer wants on board, if they want to shop on the screen or through their iPad. So lots of different B2C consideration you have to bring in, you know. So and for government environment, by the way, my next book coming up in August will be business to government pricing. Stay tuned. 432 pages of how to do price to win, value-based pricing, and pricing innovation in the government environment. So this is a book that has never been written, so I decided to write it, and I've invited about 13 contributors to share their best practices. So and obviously there is in there how to use the canvas in B2G. Very appropriate for business to government when you selling complex offers or large deals, large bids, because in Thales, for example, we are focusing on the 3 C's of pricing, day in, day out. So do you have any particular recommendations on how to approach companies that are not so familiar with value-based pricing? Yeah, that's tough, because obviously you're not dealing with a sea of customer, and you know, traditionally you would either do one C cost and then maybe pay a little attention to competition. So and not that much change. So it is you know, it is going to be complicated to use a canvas if you don't do any value work and if you don't have a great amount of customer centricity. And I would say I would not start with a canvas, but I would start with training and then pilot projects on really starting to pay attention to the customer box. But you quickly realize that you don't have the data and you're missing the customer centricity and the customer operations data. So this is more of a long-term, not, you know, mid to long-term project, and the canvas is not going to be helpful on the C side. So, but you know, you got to start somewhere. So if you're in a cost plus environment and you want to do a subscription, you may want to introduce the, you know, the PMIC as a way of training your team on, and you know, I never say, you know, all we do is value-based pricing. You know, my approach is always been to look at the 3 C's, you know, and obviously a strong pillar on customer, a strong pillar on competition, and a strong pillar on cost. And you know, these 3 C's will allow you to make a very intelligent pricing decision at the end. So anyway, this is lots of good questions, lots of good comment. I hope you can use the canvas, and I think it's a great way to rally troops around the process, to make it, you know, you can use it as well as a training tool. If you want to, you know, obviously if you're moving into the subscription world or the usage-based pricing world, a new pricing model, it's a great way to channel all the conversation and to find, you know, to assemble and document all the relevant information. And then as you frame your innovation, you know, I wouldn't say that you put that in the main deck. You know, obviously in the main deck, you're going to put your pricing decision. You know, it's going to be a good, better, best. We're going to have, you know, this is the model, this is the pricing structure. And then all the relevant support information are in 1 slide or 2 slides in appendix. If you could get to that point, this is phenomenal. So it brings confidence, it shows that you're professional in your work, and then it also connects the pricing canvas to the business model canvas and the lean canvas, and which I think it's, people love these canvases up there, and why not do our own canvas, right? You know, so, and if you want, the canvas is available on the CAP group. I've posted it several times. It's on SlideShare as well. On my website at valueinterruption.com. And if you really don't find it or you live in a cave, I can send you a paper copy, but I can email you seriously. So if you want it, I have it available, and you can do your own template. It's PowerPoint with a text box. All right. So I'm gonna let you go to your full-time work. If you like it, you know, if you like this webinar, I'm gonna do more on different topics, and you know, we have to be working together as a community, you know, and helping each other. And it doesn't have to be just me. If you guys have a great topic you want to share, or we could do panels, we could do anything we want. We're a community, and as practitioners, I think we should, you know, help each other and promote best practices. So the next one could be on business to government pricing if you want to learn the basics, and you know. So I'm planning on doing 1 every 2 months or 1 every 3 months, so that we have, you know, more of sharing. And the next step for me is to send you a survey. So I appreciate if you could take the survey. It'll take 5 minutes, and the survey will be a chapter in the book for the C-suite. It will be branded PPS and CAP, and it will be kind of a vision of the pricing community on how the C-suite perceives and views pricing. So that it's not me saying it, it's CAP saying it, pricing folks saying it. Okay, with that, you know, do not take no for an answer. Remember this very powerful button right here, DEFCON 5. All right, guys, you have a great day, and stay hungry, have fun, and then you know where to find me on CAP if you need anything else. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.